Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of High Tea with Hony. I'm your host Hony Premlal, and today we have a very special guest with us, Ben Holloway, a culture and customer specialist who has spent over 20 years of delivering consistent results of some of the world's leading brands. From turning around the fortune of health heroes, relaunching the Height of Water, Ben's passion for building better relationships and transforming business through people, process and technology has made him a sought-after leader in his field. He's the founder of Hollowsy Consulting, where he helps businesses navigate change to build powerful brands, and with a focus on customer excellence. Today, we will be delving into a fascinating journey, discussing the power of customer-centeredness, the importance of making change enjoyable, and his insights on lifelong learning and collaboration. So, grab a cup of tea, sit back, and let's dive into a fascinating conversation with Ben Holloway. So, Ben, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome to High Tea with Hony.
Thank you. Good morning to you all.
Thank you, Ben. And so you have worked some incredible brands like P&O Cruises, Majestic Wine, Helpful Heroes. So what has been the most rewarding transformation you have seen in your career?
I think the one that sticks out for me is Helpful Heroes, because it was at a point in its journey where, when I joined, it was in danger of becoming irrelevant, with all the best endeavours of the people in the business, in the organisation. And that was just a really exciting journey, moving it from a place that no one realised was a problem, to one where it continues today. So that was really interesting, Helpful Heroes. I don't know if you know their journey, but effectively they grew out of a need for some rehabilitation services for some injured service personnel, but they got to a point where they were associated with physical conflict and physical injuries from war zones, but long since they'd stopped. But there was a real need in mental health care. So it was about transforming them from physical injuries to what we called hidden wounds, which was the sort of mental health PTSD support.
Yeah, that's an amazing story to start with. So how's your journey has actually evolved since you worked with them? Do you feel, because it's very niche, very different client groups you normally work with, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I do is, I guess you would call it agnostic to the sector, because what I'm doing is I'm looking at what are the fault points, what are the issues in this organisation, and how do we make sure that we improve the foundations of the business. And by that I mean you're looking at the people who drive the business, the culture in which the business operates and the way it works, and the technology, not forgetting the processes that it uses in order to function. So that's really a facet, or four pillars you'd find in any business. And then what I did, like we did at Helpful Heroes, is make that brand as compelling as it can be once we've made the business as solid and resilient as it needs to be.
Yeah. So can you share some of the strategies how companies can effectively embed onto the cultural element?
Yeah, I mean, I see culture almost like a logo that you often see, or a name through a stick of rock. It's the DNA of a business, and it transcends every operating team and operational member of staff. And effectively, the culture really decides and defines how the business works in its space. But critically now, with very discerning customers who are more engaged about a business and all its skeletons in the closet with the growth of social media, culture enables, in the right way, a business to be authentic. So one of my things is to make businesses as engaging to customers as it can be. Now, many people just stop at what I call the outside. By the outside, I mean the digital channels, the things that customers externally will see of a brand. So if it's a service, it's the way they're engaged with it. It's a product, it's the quality, it's the logo, it's the size, it's the fit, etc. But what I think is really important, where I've seen real game-changing cultural work, is when you go into the very DNA, the centre of the business. So it's infusing a customer-first approach in everything you do. So it's asking that question, why are we doing it that way? How does it benefit the customer? And it's taking it beyond just the traditional teams into all areas of the business. I'll give you an example. With the RYA, the Royal Yachting Association, we were looking at how we could make new services more resilient. And one of the ways we could do that is involve people across the organisation when we planned the launch of new services. If I give one example, we were looking at how we could take things online for payments for various services and courses. And one of the things that we were able to do by bringing the finance team into one of our planning sessions, we could see what's going to work, what will the process be, what will the tool work be. Oh, we haven't got enough licenses to enable enough people to buy things online. We need to change that. And what that focus does is it gets more people involved and aware of your customers, but it takes out a lot of risk and uncertainty. So it can be a really useful exercise in future-proofing both the business, but making change less dramatic, so more sustainable. And that starts with the culture.
I agree completely. Culture, it's is this define the organization, isn't it? So when you're making change in an organization, especially a big businesses, it's the people element is really hard for them to bring that journey with you. So how do you make sure you bring people with you in that it's enjoyable as well? So because change, no one really wanted change, is it? Unless you really want. Very few people say I want change.
I've always found, and it's probably letting a bit of a industry secret out, I've always found it worthwhile to focus on the people who are the biggest opponents of change, rather than go for people that will follow if you give them the information. Find I guess sometimes called the naysayers, the people who are look at it from a different perspective. Because often in those conversations, you look at some critical elements that relate to both their fear of change, but also experiences of change in the past that's gone wrong. So they can be your biggest advocate if you can work with them to uncover and unpick. Why do you think that way? What's the problem? How should we go about this? What's happened before and gone wrong? And, that's been my biggest learn, really. If you can take somebody who is known in the organisation to be a change challenge, I guess, and you enable them to be change positive, massive bonuses happen and you get far more engagement from people who are on the fence.
I agree with you, because I know in my career as well, we call change champions, and you pick the people who have more influence, and they're probably more difficult, but once you get them on board, you might have better success. You mentioned about the Help for Heroes as a major success story. Can you go a bit more into and how you work with them, and a bit more storytelling? Could you share that story a bit more?
Yeah, I'll try. So at the point in which I was involved, Emma and Bryn Parry, the founders of Help Heroes, were stepping away. And they wanted to make sure, quite rightly, that they were handing over an organisation fit for the future. So you had to be very careful. And at the time, we had, I think it was 4 recovery centres around the country, largely based in military bases. And the challenge was that we were delivering physical injury services and rehabilitation. And we were needing to transition those staff and those services to support people both remotely but with mental health care. Now, the two challenges, well, the main challenge to that was really how we engage the audiences. So firstly, this all started from a piece of research that we did to find out why people weren't engaging with Help for Heroes. And it wasn't relevant. Well, it was that it wasn't relevant. Sorry, it wasn't that it was brand association. There was a positive mood around the organisation. It's just there was no relevance, no reason to give. And when we did further research, we uncovered an opportunity for mental health care. But that would mean reshaping our existing services. But also we had a great footprint to deliver those services, because we were working with people like Canine Partners and Combat Stress, Walking with the Wounded, and we had physical locations that they could partner with us at, that service personnel could easily get to. So it was a question of how do we reshape and reframe the services. And it was about research, but also it wasn't just about being relevant to the donors, the people that funded the service. It was about reaching through a culture that was hard to get through in the military, where mental health issues, the mental health arena was very difficult to broach because of the reserve and the approach to just get on with it. So we had to look at ways in which we could both be relevant to the audience, but also make sure that we reached and engaged with the people we were supporting. So it was about building up what we called our band of sisters, band of brothers network, to build in and around the partners of those that were suffering, but also going out through support organisations, friends, relatives, GPs, to kind of engage people to come to us.
Obviously, I know about the organisation, the work everyone does, and it's amazing to hear how this is also changing their life as well. So for you, lifelong learning and development seems to be the key themes in your career. How do you stay ahead in your such fast evolving industry, and what advice would you give to others to do the same?
I've always been fascinated by new discoveries, but always wanting to validate, well, what's the use case? Should I do it? I have a thing called just because you can doesn't mean you should, which means I'm always discovering and wanting to learn things. So I guess it's more of an attitude than I'm particularly studious and academic. But I am a chartered marketeer, so that encourages me to build constant sort of professional development and engage myself with people, and I try to make sure that I'm doing stuff within different sectors at least possibly twice a week, and I'm just always trying to impart my learning to others and learn from others. So I've just recently been accredited to deliver a masterclass in marketing and change for an organisation called Winmark Global, and we've got our first sessions next year. But that's also enabling me to get into their community and faculty and learn from some of their other trainers around, people change, operations, efficiency, business strategy. There's always something you can learn, in essence. So I guess I always start from the position that I don't know everything and probably never could. So I'm always open to learn from others. And when a new client comes to me, the first thing I'll try and do, other than learn their business, is learn their sector. And that really is a thirst for knowledge, to learn more about what's topical, what's relevant, what's specific. I was recently working with an international client, and they're quartered in China. And one of the things I've now started to learn is a book or model by a gentleman called Richard Lewis. He's published a book many years ago called When Cultures Collide, and it's all about cultural elements of international trade. And I'm learning so much. So there's always something you can learn, and I think if you're open to it, you'll go and learn it.
Amazing to hear that. Obviously learning is something I'm passionate about as well, trying to learn something new every year. So you have worked in different industries, completely different, because obviously not many people can do that. So what sort of industries is really, this is it, you love the most? Is there any particular one is that, or do you don't have any favourites? Or
I guess I like the challenge of using a particular approach regardless of sector, as long as I learn the sector rather than just go in blindly and do stuff. I've always worked, one commonality, I guess, or two commonalities of the businesses I've worked in, they've all been customer focused and they've all been highly regulated. So I particularly enjoy working with consumer facing businesses, but where they're regulated, there's a bit more intrigue and challenge, because what you have to work with is very much more difficult or challenging, and that's quite enjoyable. So with Help for Heroes, there's various constraints on what we could and couldn't do to do with how we were registered as a charity.
Ben, have you done any work in the social housing sector, or you have any interest coming into the sector? Because we are highly regulated and consumer standards are already in place, and many organizations are not doing really well. They're supposed to be, especially local authorities and registered housing providers. So do you have an interest in coming into the social housing sector?
I think, that's an area that I would like to come and learn about. I've got 2 construction clients at the moment. One is an international building firm, and the other one is a specialist architects. And another thing that I guess connects all the businesses that I've worked with is they have a social purpose, or they're purpose-driven businesses. And I think that's really important. So just by chance, the majority of organisations I've worked for have had either a foundation or they've been a charitable status business. So partly my values are determined by having a social benefit in what they do. So, the social housing sector fits that.
I'm looking forward to seeing in the social housing sector more as well, Ben. So collaboration is often called the cornerstone of the business, success in the businesses. So in your experience, how can organisation foster better collaboration between teams and within organisation or externally, and how this help to achieve more results? So can you share something we can learn? Because obviously one of the biggest challenge I've seen in the sector is not collaborating enough.
Several things. So my personal belief structure is about we achieve rather than I achieve. So I always have gone into every project that I've done with how we can take the team with me or people we can work with to deliver a better end result. So I'm always looking, when I'm doing any work, to see who I can harness to build a better outcome. So for example, I'm working on a culture project at the moment where I'm using a particular culture tool to hang all the work from, and working with a culture design specialist to give that the best chance of success by using that model at the heart of everything that we're kicking off. So collaboration isn't just working with others externally, it's also my preferred approach in remodeling a business or an organisation. There's nothing worse than silos in a business. So it's about getting everyone to work together to understand a common thread, which I guess is the customer. The commonality and collaboration are really best fostered when you're working around a customer. That's the thing that enables you to come in, be paid, work, do your job. That's who you're doing it ultimately for. So I think it's about the spirit of what I'm trying to infuse across a business, which is taking that customer insight and pushing it into different parts of the organisation so they've got relevance, interest and equity in improving the way that they work. And in my first few months of running the business this year, I have really worked hard to build that black book of connectors, people that can work with me when I'm working with an organisation. I don't know everything, and there are little niche things that I might be doing which I need to defer to someone more talented to deliver. So for example, cultural redesign. I understand it and I've done it, but if I really want to make it land, I need a really good piece of IP in the middle of that in order to log things appropriately and deliver real change.
I really like the black book of connectors. I should start writing one as well. So Ben, how did you reach into what you're doing now? Is that your career started with, or you evolved? How did you get here?
Oh, wow. So there's a bit of a backstory. It's a bit boring, but effectively my first foray into commercial business was really in this sector that I do now, coming out of a bad assault when I was in the police. And at that time, I was working with businesses. So that was a lucky break, I guess, because I was then recruited to an organisation called Business Link. And my role really was initially as a startup specialist to help people build their business, but then into the corporate team to work with brands you might be more familiar with, sort of Euronics, Twinings, Britax, Stana, those types of organisations. That really built up my hunger for sort of working with businesses. And then I went to work with a really big FE provider, Sparshot College, where my love of skills then really started. And that was about building and connecting brands into the education environment that I worked in. And from that, I set up or helped grow a creative agency with a gentleman called Tim McMillan. And we were literally a small fish in a very big pond, but we wanted to act like the big fish. So that's where with Tim, we brought on Majestic Wine and Mothercare as our sort of clients, amongst others. And then when that was sold, I went to work for a series of people who were our customers. So that took me through Hippo Waste. They are a disruptor in the waste space, where they have introduced these foldable yellow bags in place of those solid metal skips. I then went from there into Help for Heroes, which we've already discussed, and then I did some turnaround pieces of work and analysis bits for Southampton City Council and P&O. I had a really interesting project that I did with the NHS. That's probably worth touching on, where it's about bringing undiscovered talent into the NHS. That was quite fun. And then I started some longer term project work, firstly with the Royal Yachting Association, making them more agile and relevant to specific audiences. And then from there, went to the Investment Association in London to deliver change and improve services. And really, at the end of last year, that's when I decided to set up my own organisation, my own business, because before then I was just doing contract work, really, or project work. So the first few months of this year in the new business, I've really been building those connectors into my hub, and then I've been building a referral network, and now I'm doing networking to kind of grow awareness. But it's been a big learning curve, really.
Thank you, Ben, for sharing that story. It's inspirational already. So you won several awards, companies like Hildon, Mothercare. What do you think sets a truly successful campaign or initiative apart from the rest? What do you think has stood out?
The biggest thing, and I cannot say this more strongly enough, is authenticity. Don't layer something on the outside of your business that the rest of the business doesn't support. Increasingly now, customers want a brand that resonates with their own values. They want brands that add value to their life rather than sell to them. So if you really want to make that game change, really have a campaign that's rooted on authentic elements of your business. So that's why I always work on those elements first. And that was the case at Help for Heroes, for example, where rather than just drive a new campaign, it was about us as an organisation thinking, where do we need to be? And therefore the campaign can layer on to, the Hidden Wounds service rather than what we're currently doing and just have a new video for that. So I'd say authenticity before you then create anything. But one of the biggest things I've enjoyed with all of the regulated challenges of my journey and the organisations has been finding a creative thread to get them out of that space, to try something different. So at Hippo, we were traditionally targeting and taking business from the traditional waste market, people wanting a skip, and this is much better to have a bag. But then we thought, right, why don't we create a whole new market? Why don't we enable and empower people to do stuff for themselves at home that happens to create waste, and they associate, I need to get that taken away, Hippo will help us. I don't know if you remember that Kingfisher or B&Q used to do those help guides by the tills as you went out of the DIY stores that they had, or they have. And we built this approach based on those, that we created a series of articles around doing stuff at home that creates waste. So things like make a home office, I think it was building a non-load bearing wall. It was decluttering your children's rooms ready for study, boarding your loft, sorting paint out, racking your garage. All of those things that help people do things for themselves, but also create waste that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So that's kind of what we did. The other thing that we did there was to talk about waste in a way people aren't used to. So one of the benefits or bonuses of Hippo and how they're run is the traceability of everything you put in one of those bags. And that is quite unique in the waste space. So we talked very much about that, and we championed about fly tipping. And we created pathways for people to report it. So we tried to be authentic and responsible, and that was then recognised in the income and change that we had.
An interesting concept as well. So you've got the Holloway Consulting. What are the emerging trends or areas you're excited about, or something you're going to be looking at it?
I mean, I think for me, the thing that gets me up in the morning is making businesses fire on all cylinders. And I think there's two things I'm interested in most. One is the ultimate objective, which is making them more customer-centric and driving value and profits. That's the end goal. But also, it's about making them understand the different pain points in the business being different to the cause. So, for example, I had a customer come to me the other day and say, we've got problematic staff, they're being disruptive, we need to get rid of them. And I said, well, hang on a minute, what's the context? What are they doing? Well, they're saying we should do it this way and we should do it that way. And I said, well, let's have a look at the cause, because that's the smoke that you're finding in your business, but where's the fire? And as I spoke to more and more staff, I learnt that there was a resentment in a controlled way of working where customers were asking for them to do it in a different way. So really, these were staff members that were innovative and should be championed, not challenged in the business. So I think that's why I always look at people, process, culture and technology when I look to make any changes to an organisation. What is the strength there? What do we need to reinforce? Where are the hidden gems? And then from that, you can then make the brand more powerful.
You mentioned about the brand. These days, creating a brand on your own is a challenge. Do you have any advice and tips for if you're self-started? How do you create your own brand, and how do you being authentic? Because you mentioned about authenticity as well. What's the key things people be looking out for? Whether it's a personal business or is it as a one person setting their own, or is a big business, but whatever it could be. What do you think is the key principle?
I think it's have a really good moral compass and set values that you can deliver and stand behind. So for me, I have things like, for example, I'll turn down business if they just want a quick fix, but I can see deep-rooted problems. If I'm putting my name to something, it's both a two-way conversation. It's how can I help them, how can they help me, etc. But if I am unable to add the way that I work best to a business, it's often a reservation for me to work with them, because if that mindset isn't there, it's going to be limiting on what I can deliver. So I would say to people, look at what your personal values are and layer them into the way that you screen business, the way you do business. So for example, I'm always trying to be agnostic. I'm always learning. I look at the bigger picture, and generally I'm insight-led. And I don't always take that first sort of sniff of a misfire, like the smoke, as that's the problem. It's not always the case. There's something else usually starting those flames. So I would say work out what your principles are, what your values are, how you will work, and they'll give you a framework in order to grow and be yourself and talk about yourself and build your personal brand. But they'll also enable you to resonate better with like-minded, mindsetted customers that will enable you to thrive.
Great advice for me as well, Ben. So you have talked about Help the Heroes. Is there any other particular organisation you worked and you're thinking this is something I like to do. Is there any particular projects caught your eye more than anything? Because I know you work with many big firms.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple. I'll pick two. One is a pro bono arrangement I have with a large, or wanting to be large, charity called the Just Finance Foundation, and that's just a nice thing to be involved with. So what we are trying to do is to grow and engage awareness of money management, but in young people. So these are people that they're targeting who are in primary education or infants and juniors, so age 4 to 11. And that model is based around the value of money, how to save money, how to budget, things that aren't currently an element of the current national curriculum. So that's been really fulfilling to be involved in that. So that meets more of my personal values, but also a creative challenge I've enjoyed was at Hildon, where we were in the shadows of many of the big brands. Now, not many people may know Hildon unless you've been to a particular hotel, but Hildon produces a product that is highly regulated. It's called mineral water, but you and I would see it the same as any other clear fluid marketed under water in the supermarket, but it made it more challenging. But we were taking on the likes of Volvic and Evian, to name a few. And one of the things that I loved doing was trying to spot the holes in our competitors' marketplaces. Now, the big thing with Volvic was, or Evian, probably better, Evian, was that they use a lot of imagery that isn't their own. I mean, they've designed it, but it's not their environment. It's not where they are. And one of the big benefits of Hildon was how well the owner, Christian Hippo, had architected the limited footprint impact on the environment. The estate itself, you could drive past and it looks like wandering fields, nice copses of trees, a few horses and some hares running around. The factory, you'd really struggle to spot. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, we're in a beautiful part of the Test Valley. We draw from some really pure water. Let's talk about that. Let's use that, because when I went to Evian, and those that have actually been to Evian the town, it looks like an oil refinery with forklifts and everything going across the place where they bottle at source some of their water. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, if that's the reality, why don't we talk about the reality of our space, and we talk about the purity and the environment, and we talk about what we do for nature and our foundation to bring value back to the local community. And that's kind of what I really loved doing. And it was coming out of the shadows, and then from there we got a massive contract with Hilton Hotels. We went into Harrods, we were listed in Ocado, and that was just a pleasure to be involved in that environment.
Ben, you touched on many success stories. Were there been any, projects you taken and you felt, oh, you're not going the right track? And have you got any experience like that? And then you had to, revisit and perhaps take a change of direction? Can you think about any difficult ones?
Well, I would say that I was working at Sparsholt College, which, for those that don't know it, is nestled on the green side of Winchester in the centre of Hampshire. And it's a 150-acre campus at its core, but it also has a sister college in Andover, which is more of a mainstream FE college. And it's a land-based college, so it teaches people about working on the land, animal management, fish management, etc. And one of the challenges was there's the government funding changed for colleges, and there's a thing called EMA, which is the Educational Maintenance Allowance, or at least used to be called that, and it subsidised people's travel to the college. It would be how I would have looked at it, or how it affected that. So we are having an impact on numbers. So we need to look at getting commercial income in, and I guess the first approach was just to look at brands that we could get to work with the college, because you think what you've got there effectively is the makings of a corporate away day, because you've got lakes to fish in, you've got quad bikes and fields and courses to go around, you've got a horse equine centre, there's the zoo, as I called it, which taught a lot of people animal management, particularly with the zoo sector. And there was great learning environments, both in the forest and also some of the lecture theatres were ideal for sort of group learning. And it'd been around for 100 years, so it had a lot of provenance. But the biggest challenge was how we went about it first was wrong. So it was about looking at because it was done in isolation. And I guess that's why I learnt about working collaboratively rather than on your own missions in isolation. So what I learned from that was work with the teaching staff, explain to them the benefits of working to build relationships with brands, and talk to them about getting returns from that. What could you then buy and invest in, and dispelling the myth that it would stop them teaching. So some of the things that we did was to bring in the RSPCA, that were training their inspectors. We brought in Husqvarna, that is a chainsaw, an outdoor tools brand, and that created frameworks and access to equipment which enabled some of the learners to have better experiences. But also, one of the things we started to do is speak to IBM, who have an R&D facility in Hursley just along the road, and it was using their expertise to help QA some of the training, particularly on the apprenticeship side. So we were looking at a digital apprenticeship at that time, using the IBM to help provide evidence and give the students some expert time away from the college. So I would say, yes, don't work in isolation. Collaborate, but with context. Do it with a shared purpose.
Big learning. So come to that point. So obviously, what advice would you give to leaders who are navigating change successfully in the organization? You mentioned before about, obviously, this is, change is happening everywhere, whether you like it or not, because of the environmental change and financial pressures or regulatory change. We have to constantly make changes. So what advice would you give to leaders if they're initiating change, and how do they approach them?
I suppose the point I would make first is, if you're not making any change, you're actually going backwards. And we're not in an environment where somebody says, I didn't go to your website because it was rubbish. They're not necessarily going to tell you that unless they bought something and the product wasn't very good. So you have to make change just to stand still. And remember, your competitors are going to be doing it anyway. So you need to be doing something. And I would say fear of change is the biggest issue, not change itself. I often talk about change in the context that you're in the valley, the foothills of where you are, and you see change as almost like the top of a mountain ridge ahead of you. The reality is that two things will help you there. One, get guidance and support. But two, nobody climbs, as far as I know, Everest in one go. They do it in a series of managed base camps. So change is best delivered incrementally, so it can be more sustainably introduced into a business. So it's not, no one should be saying, right, tomorrow we're going to U-turn the whole business model. That's not sustainable. So you need to make it last. You need to take the people with you. But the biggest fear really with all of these things, even if you're on that journey, is the mindset. Don't be scared of change. There are many things that managing change well can take away out of your fear. So one of the biggest objectives that I look at is de-risking things. If you actually use evidence and you work across the business, like I was talking about at the Royal Yachting Association, when you involve more people in that process, you're de-risking that change element because you're bringing more evidence, more scrutiny and more perspectives on a problem. So it's a more resilient development process or change process, and it's less open to wide fluctuations in will it succeed, will it not. So I'd say that would be my sort of perspective on that. It's really, don't be scared of change of old. Think about the control mechanisms that you can put in place, both in terms of speed and scrutiny and areas of focus, that means that you're not going to put yourself in a force 9 gale. You're almost in a harbour, really, if you manage it well. So it's about enabling people around you to make change, but creating in your own mind a framework which doesn't make it as choppy.
Ben, is there anything you would like to share with our viewers and audience, or anything we haven't really touched upon it? Just trying to think. Obviously, you have a lot of, knowledge in different areas, and so is there anything we missed out, or anything you would like to share?
Well, I suppose the biggest learn I found is hidden talent in the business is one of the biggest neglected areas that I've found consistently. One of the examples I give was an organisation that I worked with where they were struggling to fill a key role. But they were looking at people's skills in a traditional model, and that's not the way you should look at skills in a business. The problem is businesses and environments change, and sometimes people are a square peg in a round hole. So if somebody's a square peg in a round hole, create a square hole. It's all about managing talent well. And I would say one of the best things an organisation can do around its people is to really map holistically their skills. I'm not just talking about their skills at work. That's pointless. Look at their skills as a human being. What do they offer? What skills aren't they using in their day job because they used those skills before in a previous job but don't need them now? What are they doing out of work? For example, they might be running a cub group. They may be doing stuff in a voluntary capacity that's giving them life skills. They may be a carer, so they're very good at one-to-one work. What I encourage people to do is do a proper skills map of your organisation, which makes you both resilient and future fit, because you're then capturing, if something changes or an opportunity arises in your business, you have a true blueprint or reference point to go back to and say, right, okay, well, this new role needs X, Y, and Z. Well, I've got that in this person here, I've got that in that person there. Don't look at people so much in silos of the team they're in. Look at the skills they have, and by that, the skills they have as a human being, not as a worker in job ABC. Then you can interrogate that data at any point for any reason, and you can call from the skills and experience from within as a starting point to take away some of the risk of launching something new with a whole new set of people.
Ben, it's amazing to hear the number of things you mentioned. Obviously, the big takeaway for me is the collaboration, and then obviously getting people on board with you, because you mentioned about the change. Yes, we need to constantly evolve and change, otherwise the world is changing, and if we are going to be left behind. So Ben, thank you so much for sharing your insight and stories with us today. It's clear that your passion for building relationship, driving customer-centric transformations, continuously improving not only yourself but the team you work with has truly set you apart from your field. So it's amazing that experience. You mentioned various industries as well. So for anyone looking to learn more about Ben's work or connect with him, I highly encourage to check Hollowsy Consulting, where Ben continues to help business grow and thrive. And Ben, wish you well the best in the future endeavors, and we're excited to see how you continue to make an impact. I know you will be changing even more industries and making more success stories, so may even capture that later on. Thank you once again for joining High Tea with Honey, and to our listeners, be back with another guest next week. Until then, take care, and have a good day.
Thanks.